Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal's Polyglot Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Benjamin Bresington. Ben is the CEO of Automate Boring, a custom RPA and AI development company that helps companies streamline their processes and boost productivity. Ben, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Hey, my pleasure.
So I know I gave the quick introduction, but if you could just introduce yourself to our audience, that'd be awesome.
So I'm an Australian, as you can tell. I got a weird accent. I do reside in right now Arkansas or Fayetteville, Arkansas in the US. And I really help companies implement automation. So I create those robot employees. I take your boring tasks and automate them to really help you become more profitable and leverage AI in today's market. That's what I help people do.
Thank you for that. I thought I sensed an Australian accent, but you mentioned Arkansas, so I was like, you know what? I didn't ask, but that makes sense. Okay, maybe then I have a question for you as we get to the end of the podcast. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to learn, Ben, about your company, what you do, and also about scalability, right? So one of the things we're going to talk about today, the topic we sort of picked is scaling a company to over $100 million. What is what are the challenges, what are the types of problems you're solving, and what does it mean, and what is the need for this, and how does it help your clients, right? So we're going to delve into a number of different things, but to sort of help get the conversation started, I'm going to do a screen share of your company so people get an idea here. Let me do this. I want to make sure I pulled up the right one. This is your company, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, I'm just going to spend a couple of seconds here. That way, folks sort of see the visual, the website, and then they can look it up. And we're going to include the links in the podcast as well, so folks can check this out. So, I know you gave an introduction there, Ben, but if you could talk a little bit more specifically about some of your services, and then we can jump into the scaling part.
Yeah, so it all really revolves around process automation, or the buzzword for that now is AI automation. And it's more than there's some people may know things like Zapier or Make or tools like that to do automation. There's actually automation that goes beyond that, which is what they call robotic process automation. And that's been around for 15, 20 years now. And what it does, it actually allows you to move the mouse, because there's a lot of software out there that exists, or a lot of processes where you're using online and offline software. Your software may exist on a server and you need to copy data from one system to another system across the server. And that data and the software you're using isn't browser based. So typically that type of automation is problematic. We do a lot of invoice analysis, data extraction, report generation. And now with our AI agent platform that we're actually about to publish in the next few weeks, we can actually create AI agents. So robot employees with no code. So if you've ever used ChatGPT, you can now tell our AI the team or the task you want to automate. It'll build a team of agents. This is what they call that now, agentic model. And it allows you to then deploy that with no code, no experience. Because one of the things, as we were scaling out our tax automation business, so we actually do a lot with automating services for the IRS to help people with tax debt. And we realized that our team don't all know how to code, right? So, and with a lot of these automation solutions or AI solutions, there's still a coding requirement. So we realize that what we want to do is we want to empower every team member in our company to be able to create AI automations for any task they do so they can become more profitable and efficient. So we built our own platform that allows us to do this. And we're going to be releasing it to the public over the next few weeks. And you can literally type in what you want it to do. Like, I want it to research trending articles based on top tweets on Twitter today, for example, or X, right? And then it will actually extract that, analyze which topics would be best to write an article, write the article, proof the article as though it's an editor, SEO optimize the article, and then it can publish it to your WordPress blog. And then it can actually take that and then create all the social media posts to actually promote it and drive traffic back to your website. You can automate that entire workflow just by having a conversation with our AI. It'll build that whole system out and then allow you to deploy it with no code. So that's kind of the breakthroughs we're having with our team. And our team's becoming more efficient because of that. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Okay, so I'm going to take an example, and if it's not the best one, we can probably take a different one as well. Just so for me to digest what you guys do, and then ask something more specifically to the rest of the conversation, right? So we are, let's say, a product company based out of the Washington D.C. metro. We do a number of different things. One of the things we do is build APIs for other businesses to integrate, right? So in other words, we have our APIs published on AWS Marketplace and other API hubs. So if you're building a mobile app or a web app or maybe even a server-side system, you can focus on your core customer problems and the real business that you're trying to, the real requirements you're trying to address, and sort of leave a lot of the back end, quote unquote, boring heavy lifting to us. So if you're doing, say, access control, you don't have to implement access control on your server. You can leverage your APIs and build your system and implement whatever access control you need. That's sort of at the 50,000 foot level as to what we do. So for a company like us, I want to sort of take the way you solve problems and see how we could sort of benefit from it, right? That's one thing we do. And I'm going to say a couple of quick things and then we can delve into where the most relevant fit would be, right? And one of the other products we have is like a project management platform where you can go manage your projects on a day-to-day basis, be at work, at school, in college, or whatnot. And then we have a
Hmm.
mobile app that supports the same feature. So those are some of our products. And we are a polyglot shop that uses different systems, different languages, frameworks, and we are predominantly on AWS, but also have dependencies to some extent on Google Cloud and Azure as well. So say a company like us would be what would be some of the things here, Ben, that would actually require automation that that you would be able to help? And if that's not a good example, we can pick a different example as well.
Well, I'll just pick some of the basic examples we do for clients. So first of all, we usually start around the invoicing or finance sector. So there's a whole side of your business where what happened when payments went through. So invoice generation, validating that payments went through, that they were processed. What happened on failed payments or past due payments? Automating the collection cycle. So one example I can tell you is we ran a report for a client. They've got about 9,000 client, right? And one of the things they did is they weren't reconciling that client's invoices against their statements to make sure their charges were correct, right? Very simple. Were clients going over or above and things like that? And their system wasn't fully set up to like track if they'll get charged the way they should be, or if they're maybe overcharging or undercharging what was allowed in a contract, right? It's a bit of a tedious task, and it's not necessarily always the priority for an accounts team, right? Because you're like, it'll be all right. We'll deal with it next month. And you just kind of forget to sometimes deal with the dynamic nature of some costs,
Right.
right? So for this one client, we literally downloaded what this required us to do was log into their software, and there was 3,000 clients. We had to download 3 PDF reports from this software. So that's 9,000 PDFs, right? This is why this client never did this task, because they're just like, not worth it. If a client complained, they did something. So they may have done one every 2 or 3 months, right?
Right.
So we were able to download all 9,000 PDFs. So we had built an automation to do that. And then we built an automation to analyze the contract and the last charge to see if there was over or under, if it was correct. This actually resulted in us finding from that analysis an in excess of close to $900,000 in billables. That was additional revenues that they were entitled to be charging. And they also found that their vendor was mischarging them. So therefore, they had a
Okay.
claim against their vendor because the vendor that they were reselling some of these services was overcharging them. So they were actually then able to increase their margins based on just a reconciliation that normally is too hard to process. Does that make sense?
No, it does. So let's get deeper into that, right? So you mentioned 3 PDFs that you had to download for each of their clients, and there are 3,000 of them. So there were 9,000 PDFs, right? So is that a repetitive process? In other words, is that something that needs to be done once a month, or is it like a one-time thing?
So for this client, they now do this process once a month, 4 days after the actual monthly report is reconciled, therefore allowing them to maximize that revenue. Previously, they really hadn't done this. And they knew it was an issue. They knew there were some problems, but it was just kind of like, we'll deal with it later. And later never happened, right? Because it's also the human labor to do that. Like, just think about that, logging in, waiting for the cloud software to load, because it's not just poppy stuff, right?
Right.
Like, it's like, hey, You got to wait for this web page to load. You got to go down and click on the client, and then you got to go click on export report. And then there was like 10 clicks you had to do before you even got to the report, right? And you had to do this
Right.
process 3,000 times. How much human error do you think would happen in that process? And then the other thing was, well, we'd have to outsource to a offshoring team who would do this data entry, which is then time, communication, training, where we built our bot automations that were now able to do this. And they could trigger this to happen any day of the week. And it would just take a few hours for the process to run. And it literally completed all of the downloads and then the data
Okay.
analysis.
So Ben, let me understand. Let's step back a bit, right? Just so I get this. So let's say there's 3 PDFs per client and it's 3,000 clients. So what are the steps in the process? The first thing you mentioned was someone had to, prior to this, right? I know you said they weren't doing it because it was almost impossible for them to do it, but assuming that they were doing it just hypothetically, what would they actually have had to do? A human would have had to go into each of those web
Each
pages
client profile.
and
So they'd go into each client profile. They'd have to find the report
log
to
in, right?
download. Yeah. Log
So first
in,
step is
go
log
into the web
into
portal.
each of those,
Yep.
right? So it's 3,000. Is it correct that you would go to 3,000 different portals to log in to each of those clients?
They had 2 different portals for that all 3,000 clients existed. So our bot literally logged into one portal, was able to pull 2 of the reports for each client. And then to complete it, had to go and log into a third portal to download the third report. And then we compared the variables for each of those out of those 3 documents. So when you think about that, you go, okay, I'm logging into a portal, I'm downloading a PDF report, I'm saving it into a folder. So I created November 24, I save in the PDF, I'm going and then doing that process again. And then I'm going into another portal, logging into another portal, downloading that, selecting the client, downloading that PDF. So the whole process just to download something was taking about 3 to 5 minutes if you just went click, 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 right? And then you had to analyze it. And for most of the human analysis, they were copying data from one screen to another. So anytime a human is copying data from one screen to another, there is data uh, entry
They're going to make
issues.
mistakes, right? Yeah,
Mistakes
100%.
happen,
Yep.
which could mean over or under, or you're lost like there. And we know the consistency rate of that is very problematic. So like that, it's a
No,
very
yep, and
tedious
sorry.
process.
Yep, sorry to interrupt. I want to go like literally step by step so I know where the automation, how it solves this. So first step you mentioned was going to a couple of different portals and downloading those PDFs, right? And now once you download those PDFs, you have to sort them in your file system, whatever it is, right? You need to, like you mentioned, you probably have to download it and put them in a, I don't know, whatever you name them, right? You probably use the default name that the file has, or you rename it and you structure it in some way, form, or shape. So you now know that you have these 3,000 PDFs, but you can actually get them and find them. So that's a step as well, right? So
Yep.
logging into 2 portals, clicking download, and what is the size? What is the size of each of these PDF files?
Oh, it all varied, but yeah, it added up to be quite significant.
Okay, so whatever, let's say it's not too much, maybe it's not graphics, so it's some whatever, how many ever kilobytes. You
It's just
downloaded
like
them,
downloading
you
bank statements, repetitive bank statements over
right,
and over and over
bank
again.
statements, right? Okay, makes sense. You download them in your file system. Say I've done that now. Now I have 3,000 files. This is Krish doing it. If you could just walk us through, then we, that way I want to understand the pain that they had to go through, and then we can talk about the automation and where the scaling comes into play, right?
Yeah,
Now
so
let's
then
say
they
I've
had to
downloaded the
open.
3,000. What do I do
Yep,
next?
you've downloaded all 3,000 of the PDFs, well, which is 9,000 files in total, right? You've downloaded. You then had to go into the client folder, right? You had to then open those 3 PDFs. And then in those 3 PDFs, there was about 10 variables you had to copy into a spreadsheet to then be able to perform an analysis. So 10
So
variables
from
each
each of those,
PDF.
from each, right? So it's 9,000 PDFs and you had 10, so 90,000 variables. And when you say variables, it's some name, label, and a value or something like
Yeah,
that.
yep.
Okay, and you took the number. So there, let's, before we go into the 90,000, I took each of those numbers, and what do I do with those numbers? Do I put them someplace else?
Yeah, they were copied into a Google Sheet.
And that was a single Google Sheet for all the clients across all the PDFs. It's like
Yeah, so
one
we
Google
ended up
Sheet.
putting all one Google Sheet, then we had the client, and then each of the data cells from each of the reports. So then we're creating now a master report that we could operate from, but then it also could be audited because then we actually built a built-in Q&A audit process to make sure the OCR that happened on the data extraction was correct.
Okay, so basically each of the 90,000 variables had to be ported over to a single Google Sheet, right? So you would have 90,000 records in that Google
90,000,
Sheet,
so
and
9,000 rows, and then just, yeah, lots of data.
lots of data. And then what happens with is what happens after that Google Sheet is created? Is that the end of the process, or is there more to it there?
No, so on the Google Sheet, we then had to run comparison formulas to work out if it was over and under. Any of the clients that were under then had to be triggered to do something else. So it was running a workflow to go, hey, you're overcharging on this, or if they were over, if there was overage, and so they had to go to the client and go, hey, we've undercharged you, and we want to make an amendment because of your usage. So there was, yeah, so an analysis happened, and then it got segmented into two types of communication. Either it was going to have communication that, hey, our vendor has overcharged us, and because they kept the difference, right? Or if they were undercharged. So yeah, there was, yeah.
Okay, this I can feel the laboriousness, if there's such a word there already. Not I mean, forgetting the human errors of porting actual numbers, right? I don't know how big or small those numbers are, if they're decimals or floating points, but there is going to be, let's say there was a mistake. I looked at $9,642.75 and I ported that number literally manually, and if I made a mistake, how does that in the previous process, would it ever get caught, or would it just slip through the cracks?
It would slip through the tracks. It's human error. Like, humans misplace decimals all the time, or they round it when they shouldn't have rounded it. All these type of things. And when some of the numbers we were actually looking at were small numbers, so it was like 0.003, because it was like a transaction charge. So then, like, that decimal place can be quite significant on a transaction.
And not only that, when you're glazing over 90,000 units of numbers, even if you did it carefully, at some point the numbers you don't treat them as numbers, right? You start treating them as characters. So it's hard to tell whether it's a zero or an O or a dot, a here or a dot there, right?
Mhm.
Which means in the prior version, after they ported that over to a Google Sheet, did they run macros? Because you said it had to tally and reconcile and send out notifications. To do that across those 9,000 rows and number of fields there, were they using some sort of a Excel macro to tell them where the differences and discrepancies were?
So we built out just formulas in those cells. So as soon as we populated it, the other cells were running, and then based on the result of the formulas that we were running, it was then triggering another bot to do, well, first of all, share the summary with the management team, and then it was able to trigger notifications to go out via their CRM and allow them to claim some more money.
Wow. And if I missed one of those PDFs in the process and act of putting this over, I have 8,888 lines instead of 9,000 records. Now, I wouldn't even be able to tell which 112 I missed out on, for instance, right? So I guess I get the gist of the problem and the boredom of doing this. Now, let's switch gears. How does it, like, my first question is, like, do you guys offer a product? In other words, is it a custom solution, or is it a product that you actually have that you build on top of when you go to your clients?
So we work with our clients in a way that it's a subscription. We provide them with unlimited automation development per month. So it's just literally, we go, hey, what do you hate doing this month? Tell us the things you're hating doing, and we'll build you an automation for it. We'll solve that problem. We'll make it easy. So for one client, they're having a huge problem with, once again, human data entry, invoice related, typos on the invoice. They had a whole bunch of things: typos on the name, typos on the project number, typos on the invoice number, just a series of typos that were just causing conflict because, once again, they were using a project management system, which was going to an invoicing system. And then if the variables weren't correct, there'd be conflict. So then the accounts team was spending hours per week just resolving, troubleshooting, like typos in an invoice. So we literally built an automation for them that would go through their invoices every single day and validate against all these typos. It would tell them the invoices that had typos. It would tell them how we fixed that invoice. And then ones that we weren't sure on, it actually goes, hey, there's only one invoice I want you to check today, and here's the actual issue. Can you resolve it for us? So like that invoice, that helps the invoicing team ridiculously.
Okay, that makes sense. If you don't mind, we'll just go back to the previous example because I just want to take that and go through the automation process because we talked about that problem at a fair bit of length. So the first point is you essentially look
Well,
for
what
ask
we have
about
the
their
client do,
problems.
yeah, the client tells us their problems. We actually just get on a call like this and we go, share us your screen and work through the problem, right? And they literally walk us through the problem, create a screen recording of what they're doing, how they're doing it. I click here, I do that, I do this. And we ask them if there's any logic or if they're making a reasoning decision in this. So and at the end of the day, we build a decision tree of what you do. Like it's like a manual to train an intern how to do something. And then they give us that recording. And then a few days later, we send them back the automation fully operational and they can deploy it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We kind of really make it simple. Like if you can jump on a Zoom call or a Google Meet, a lot of our clients get in the process of then building looms. So they just send us a loom recording and then we just build out the automation for them based on their instruction.
Okay, that makes sense. So in our previous example, right, Ben, so let's say this was the problem we're talking about, right? Downloading PDFs, taking the data, putting it over to Google Sheet and doing it. So you saw the problem in a Zoom or a Loom recording and you're going to do it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. So you're basically building this quote unquote from scratch, but you probably have. I mean, if you could walk us through the tool itself, right? Let's say this problem that we talked about with the PDF, what you've solved the problem through automation, but how does your? I mean, what is the? Let's talk a little, if you don't mind, a little bit more technology in that sense, right? What is the tool that you're using to doing it? Like, are you building? Are you using third-party tools and sort of customizing them to solving these problems, or are you writing? I presume you're not every time writing code from line one because you have to be solving different problems for different clients. How do you go about that? Like, what does your stack look like? How do you build this software?
Yeah, so this is more of an enterprise level tool. So we use what they call RoboCorp, which is an RPA tool, and it's all custom built for each client. So that's that one. And yeah, there's various amounts of RPA tools because one of the things is there's automation tools that only work in the browser, right? This is what Zapier and Make and those type of things, they work via API or they work via the browser. And some software doesn't have an API, right? And this client was using vendor-based software that literally had no APIs. They're private, proprietary systems. So we couldn't use an API. We couldn't get an API built, and it was not going to work like that. So there was the only way they could export this data. So the tool we use is we use RoboCorp and just build Python scripts to complete this automation, and we connect it to whatever is required to complete that. So if there's an OCR interface, we've got various OCR tools to extract the data, be it using AI or no AI, and just kind of move through that process like that.
Okay. And then let's say in these two cases where you have to log into these portals, right? That's third party tools, correct? You're logging into third party tools to actually logging in. So how does let's start there with the automation, right? The first thing that needed to be done in terms of automation is logging into those two portals and downloading those PDFs. So does that
Yeah.
mean I want to understand those tools need to offer those APIs for you to be able to log in through your
No.
automation, right? Otherwise, how would
The
you do that?
we replicate the actions of the user. So if the user types a username and password and then clicks login and then they have to complete two-factor, we complete the two-factor authentication just like a user would. No API in use. Because a lot of software don't allow that, right? So we literally, if you move your mouse and do something on the computer, we literally clone that action. That's all it is.
Uh, okay, I see what you. Okay, it's more like I would draw a parallel to a testing tool, right? If you have a UI testing tool, how do you record and replay those actions? Okay, that makes sense. So in these two cases, you're like, you know what? I'm going to this place. I'm clicking this login button here, and I'm getting the two-factor auth, and you're doing X, Y, and Z to automate it. So it's not so much API integrating there. It's literally mimicking a human action to be able to log in. So once the
Yeah.
human action happens, so the tool that you're using also lets you go dig deeper into those. So I log in, I go 5 clicks into a page and I click download onto a button and then I download that essentially, right? Now let's
Correct. Yes.
say 2 months 2 months down the road, if that tool changed the button so it was placed differently or they changed the user interface, what kind of adjustments would you have to make to your automation?
We just go back into, that would actually present as an error log for us in our error log, and we could actually see which steps of the puzzle were actually broken, and we could just fix it and deploy something in minutes.
And is that reactionary, or do you have something to check repetitively that, hey, this login continues to work because next month, the day comes to doing this, I don't want to discover that these buttons moved on those platforms. How do you prepare, plan for it upfront?
Oh, so some clients want us to do a Q&A test a few days before to validate things are working. Some clients don't. They don't want that extra automation to be running. So some clients will find out on the day. And that's why we offer it as a subscription service where it's unlimited. We're doing the maintenance, we're doing the management, we're doing the updates, we're doing the tracking, because the client just wants the report. They don't want to care about the automation or how many teeth or hair you've got to pull out to complete it, right? They just want the
Right.
data. So that's part of our services where, like, hey, if on the day it breaks, where our team push a fix, find out why it's broken, and get it redeployed. And this is why, and we manage all of the virtual hosting, the virtual management of this, and we make it as simple as possible for the client because the client's got other things they're trying to do, and that's why they're not doing these tasks.
Right. Okay. And then since you mentioned subscription based, so I'm presuming that the client in this case didn't have to sort of license your software, run it in their data center or on the cloud, right? They're just leveraging you to doing this, which means those 9,000 files will be sitting in your world, right? So I'm guessing they're okay in this example where their proprietary files, they're okay for it to be hosted in someone else's platform.
Well, it's a complete secure virtual system we set up. It's where we already work with medtech companies and companies all around the world. So we're very security compliant on what we're doing because we get audited all the time. And yeah, our environments most of the time are quite safer than most of our clients' environments, to be honest. So it's a quite unique perspective. So we've never had a security issue to date, and we want to keep it that way. And
Oh, no,
that's
that
also
makes sense. The
part of
reason
the
I,
actual security environment is that it also becomes a security risk for a lot of clients to have all this data on their system. And bear in mind, once the audit was completed for us, we removed the data. Like, we don't need to store the files once we've extracted the data. And then the client gets those files. So then our system is literally erased and it's cleaned. So we know that's happened and we set that up as an automation to happen.
Right, no, I got it. The only reason I ask is, we have multiple ways to license our software. One, companies can subscribe on AWS Marketplace and other platforms. And we've had people ask us, hey, you know what? We want the service, the API to solve the problem for us, but we don't want our data to be living, even though, our data obviously is on AWS and these other platforms. Sometimes, clients want to just manage their data, right? So I was just wondering if they did want to manage their data, is there a way to provision your software on their premises, or is that not a model that you actually do support?
Yeah, our clients, if they want to manage the virtual desktop environment instead of us providing the virtual desktop environment, because we run this all through virtual desktops. Because once we get one virtual desktop running, we can clone it and they could have 1,000 of these running, literally running these reports or running these systems. So they just provide us the virtual desktop within their environment, and our team log into that virtual desktop. It doesn't matter where we deploy it. At the end of the day, it's just on a desktop computer.
Okay. So and I think I now get the picture, right? So in terms of and when you're building this, since you're basically asking for unique customer problems to solving their problems, right? So it's custom. I mean, I'm going to call it managed services, to if that is even the right word. But does it mean for you to be able to do this in quick time, do you have pre-built from a technology standpoint, right? As a software provider, do you have these pre-built components that you sort of use and leverage? Meaning, in that case, you're trying to look for verticals, right? Meaning going into automation that's invoice related, so you can leverage your tools and you can churn out these things faster. Or
Yes.
how do you go about doing it?
We do both, so it doesn't really matter for us. It's just at the end of the day, they're ugly problems because what we find is then once we take care of these problems for the client transitions and moves on to doing something else. They don't want to pick up this problem again and deal with it, right? So the thing is like they keep stacking things on our plate for us to do, so they have less to do. So our clients are happy most of the time.
Okay. I'm going to take a problem that we have, for instance, right? Maybe it's different from the problems. Let's say one of the things we do, and I want to understand how automation, would sort of play a role here. So one of the things, let me share my screen here, right? Because this is a boring task we do as a company that we would rather not do, for instance, right? Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen here. Yep. Okay. So one of the things we do is we have an education platform, Ben, right? So it's integrated into our mobile app and web app and whatnot, right? Long story short, we create courses and we have worked with course creators to publish their courses on our platform. They charge a certain amount of money, and then if for every unit of course that they sell, we do a percentage split between the two, right? A high level. We publish our own courses and we publish someone else's courses as well. There's many parts aspects to course creation, right? One is the course itself. In other words, securing microservices and API gateways, say a course, you need to record this course. This is our course, and there is certain content that goes into the recording of this course. But that's just step one in the process. Once the course is created, a number of things need to be done before it becomes available for consumption, right? There's like 10 or 12 different things that we need to do. Like if, let's say we needed something like this to be automated, I mean, would it, I mean, I don't know, we are halfway through our conversation. If this is interesting enough, we could talk about this. If not, we could go to a different problem. But if this makes sense, do you think we can talk about how you as a company would automate this?
Yeah, so this is what we now do with our Crew Forge project, where we've made it available. So we deal with a lot of content creators, and they need to create courses, create content, all this type of stuff. So for a lot of the course creators, they may have recorded some videos, for example, but they never created handouts, or they never created images, or they never created stuff to support that, or they don't have the promotion material for that course as one thing, right? So we've created an AI solution that we actually set up a full team where they upload the video. We transcribe that and train an AI actually exactly what was in the course. And then the AI will actually generate a course guide. It can actually outline quiz questions. It can then also then create social media posts and blog posts for every channel and have it optimized for every channel in that creator's voice, ready for that to be published. We've also then got automations that will then actually take those posts, if they've been approved by a human, or if it just goes in an automated workflow, so it gets generated. The AIs are actually verifying, validating, making sure it meets these standards. And then it'll actually then start posting it on all the social networks for you. We've even can integrate with voice to do, so you can actually create a course outline. So we've got one automation that we just deployed that will allow you to take a topic. It can research the topic for you, and then the researcher hands it. So the researcher bot hands it over to the evaluator to actually evaluate how this should be taught. And we actually build AI personas as professional educators that have backstories. One could be a professional educator, one could be a grading facilitator, one could be a product researcher, and then we can actually have different personas assess this topic to actually create questions. So if I'm because the problem is students have different questions based on their experience. So if I'm an experienced engineer and I'm learning this new skill, it'll generate different questions that can be fed back into the course creator go to make sure you answer these questions. So you can create learning paths optimized for different students. This is all AI generated, completely AI generated, which then can be fed into a voice overlay. And you can actually have your voice through 11 Labs or one of the many tools created. For some of our medical clients, we actually take their content and then translate it into 90 different languages for them. So then it can be presented in the different languages, and not just having English with subtitles, we can actually voice over in Spanish, French, German, Italian, Russian, Hebrew, you name it. So now you can actually make your courses multilingual, which taps you into all these different markets. And once again, all automated. So it all depends on what stage you're at and the problem you're trying to solve, and then how you're trying to take it even further. But yeah, creating course materials is something that AI can do amazingly well, and sometimes better than humans.
Makes sense, right? But one of our challenges is it needs to be integrated into our products, right? So we create a new course gets published. That
So I've got a
new
quick
course
question
needs
for
to
you.
be available.
Does your platform
Yeah,
have an API?
that's all we do, right? We are an API company. We have
So
APIs for other people to consume,
so
but not for
if
this
you're
though. Let me answer this,
well,
right? We have
it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if there's no API, because we can build an automation to log in and actually click through the process of going click, click, click to create the course, copy the content you've already loaded, That's if you
But how
do
do
it
you do
in
that on
a
a how do you do that on a native mobile app? You do it on a native mobile app as well?
from your admin, you're loading that content from into something, right? You've got an admin portal to create the content. Where are you creating the code?
We the way we've implemented our course integration, after the video and the assets and the thumbnails and the images and the text and everything is available, you need to update, say, a JSON file, right? We made it simple enough for us, right? So the JSON file sits somewhere. You need to update the JSON file, which needs to get consumed. But the reason I ask that is I know there are other people where it's actually integrated into their code base. So if it is integrated into their code base, I just want to understand how your data in and data out happens. In other words, do they have to, I guess they have to publish an API for you guys to consume, right? For you to be able to integrate into their system.
It could be an API, or it could be, hey, we're exporting all of the data into a JSON file. The JSON file is like, where do you want us to log in to give you the JSON file? So are we amending a JSON file? Are we adding a JSON file? Or are we just emailing you, here's the JSON file for this new product, and the human does that final publishing of it. So that way they can review it. That way they can check it. But if you could, the whole thing could be fully automated. Like, it's just, what do we have to do? It's just what has to be done with each step. How was it done? Once you define that, we go, okay, how do we automate that? That's literally the workflow we work through.
Okay, and then I think I get the picture. So you ask for a problem that is automation related, right? Your niche is automation, right? You're saying,
We
hey,
just
what are
we
the
just we
tasks that
just
you
ask
do?
for a problem. We just ask for what's a problem, what's something you hate doing, and we just automate it. That's what we do, or we get it done, right? So there's two. Like, automation is also outsourcing at times sometimes, but like the reality is we lean towards automating it through software.
Okay, okay, I think I get the picture. So uh, I, that gives, in other words, as long as you have a way to integrate with their systems, right? With their systems, and as long as your clients are okay with the data being hosted outside their private environments, right? If they only want data to be in their environment, then that's a different problem. But as long as they're okay with the data sitting outside their environment, then you're certainly able to help us, is the gist of what I'm getting here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I know we are like 40 minutes in. That's in terms of scaling. Anything else that you want to specifically talk about here, Ben?
No. One of the reasons we were able to scale this client to over $100 million in sales was because we tackled a problem they had, which was product fulfillment. So if any of the entrepreneurs who are out there, business owners that are out there, they'd be like, I need to scale my marketing, right? I want to scale my marketing. Everyone wants more leads. But what they don't realize is 90% of the time, the problem is with product fulfillment. So we were able to alleviate through automation a process that was taking an accountant 2 to 3 hours to complete. We were able to use automation to actually have our automation complete that process, the exact same process the accountants were doing, in 60 seconds. And it was actually
Wow.
verified and audited twice in that process. So when an accountant previously done it, it was never audited or verified, right? So there was, once again, human error, which was a big problem when you're dealing with tax-related stuff. So we took a process that involves, and this was going to be a problem for them because they would have had to get hundreds of accountants or train these people to do this process. And it was going to be a massive bottleneck, right? Sometimes this process would end up taking 15 days just because of bottlenecks and backlogs, and the accountants would get busy with tax season or whatever, like reporting flows were happening for them, right? So we were able to have it run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it took less than 60 seconds to complete, which then allowed this client to scale their lead generation. So a lot of times people scale their lead generation and marketing and don't realize that the problem that they need to be solving is a fulfillment one.
Makes sense. And then in terms of onboarding, let's say a client is like, hey, you know what, this is what I'm doing repetitively. It's mundane. I could actually have somebody else take care of this rather than them outsource the problem to humans. And in this case, they're like, hey, you know what, can you automate this for us? And you're basically charging them by however your pricing model works. Now, how does the onboarding, do they self onboard onto your systems, like go through your web page and sign up and onboard, or do they have to onboard like through humans talking to each other? How does that process work?
We have humans that talk to them. and they just do a problem analysis, and they just work with you and go, okay, let's record your screen and walk me through the process, right? And we just get them in the process of how do I document what I'm doing? Because one of the big problems is a lot of these people haven't documented their processes. And when we talk to, if you've got a team that start doing stuff, like we just showed one client that they've got 6 staff members doing this one process, right? But they've got 12 different ways this process is done. And we were able to do that through analysis. And we had to ask them, how do you want us to do this process? And which process is now going to be the company standard? Because everyone's got a different way they're doing it, and they got different variations. They thought they had one process that was standard. No, they had one result that was standard, but 12 different ways to do it. And some of these may be fully inaccurate, right? So it's generating. So the thing is just because people are getting to a result doesn't mean they're all getting there the same way. So this process
Absolutely.
also forces a company to start realizing what is our company process and what are the things that we want as a minimum threshold standard. And sometimes that's a little problematic when you got a lot of people, a lot of opinions, because it's just like, well, my way's right and this type of stuff, right? So sometimes that's what's got to be worked through, and it really helps a company because this also creates saleable assets for them, because then they can show investors or businesses or other money side of the fence that now I've got systems that are running my business, not just people. And if you want to ever sell out, you need to show that you have systems, not people.
And I couldn't agree more. I'll give you an example, right? A while ago, it's been some time, we helped a client build whatever it is that we were helping them build. But the problem was, let's say the developers were running JUnit tests. This was a while ago, so it was Java and JUnit tests. Given the dependencies of the system with the Hibernate and Spring and the number of beans that had to be loaded and the way that unit testing was set up, right? A different example, but sort of emphasize the same problem. It took about 2 minutes or so, maybe two, a little bit more, sometimes a little bit lesser. And now every time you write 10 lines of code, I recommend that people should do some level of element of testing. And imagine sitting there 8 hours a day. It takes 2 minutes to run that test, even just to test your 10 lines of code, just the way it was set up. I reckon in an hour, somebody did that like maybe 5 times at the minimum. I want to do it more times, but if it's 2 minutes, you reduce the number of times you're repeating that action. So you're spending like 10 minutes twiddling your thumbs. And 8 hours in a day, it's 80 minutes, right? Just a little bit over an hour. And there was like 18 developers, give or take, in the team. So you're talking 20 hours a day where people are just sitting there hitting run and waiting for the JUnit to kick off. And then after 2 minutes, it runs, whether it fails or succeeds. If it succeeds, great. If not, you go fix your code and then do it all over again, right?
Yeah.
Repeat the process. Now,
Yeah.
this is death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's quite a different example, but I want to mention this because I couldn't agree more with automation and optimization
Well,
in any facet of whatever it is that we do.
that exact issue of
So
code testing and code deployment is really important, right? And a lot of people don't do it. Let's be honest. A lot of people do not do it. It's not done well. I run a development team, and with our development team, we actually push code, and we've built automation to actually review the code, validate the code. So we've built AI senior engineers that review the code, will suggest code bug fixes and optimizations, and can actually then share that code that it generated back to the developer for have them to go, should this be done? We also know in that process, we also noted that a lot of commenting code should be 101. But let's be honest, most people too busy trying to make code work and Google hack code, right, to actually get it to work. So the thing is we also built into that process a full commenting system, so everything was fully commented, right? So now we actually had minimum standards in our code, and we were able to start deploying code faster because we set up these feedback loops that allowed you to focus on the problem. You actually could submit something and they could come back really quickly. And then be like, oh, I didn't even think about how optimizing that, or even having it ask you questions of how it's impacting other elements of code that you may not have even realized. So this is the power of now what we start talking about is AI agents, how you can start creating these AI agents to put into a workflow to make a process more efficient and effective. And this is a massive help because I know there's when you're coding, and people who don't code don't necessarily understand that you have to, if you want to make things mobile responsive or optimized, you've got to make it responsive for all the different layouts. Like, just because you go, yeah, why is this not working on the phone, right? Well, that's a whole process. And like, they may have optimized it for iPhone 14, but they never looked at it on an iPhone 6 screen, right? So
Right.
now, like, you've got huge issues, let alone all the Android and all the web browsers and all the different sizes. So this is a whole process of validating and like even making our code responsive and adaptive. We've built out an automation workflow that runs on our code base.
Ben, a segue, but I think an important one. You mentioned code reviews through AI agents, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
are we at a point of time, a phase of life, if you will, or that time of the century or whatnot, whatever the right phrase is, where do we need human code reviewers? Let me ask a very simple question, right? A number of things you mentioned here with AI agents, this is in people's mind. Every day you look at the news, Nvidia goes up 2%, and you ask yourself, what, how long can I be doing what I'm doing, and when should I be doing things very differently? So in this context, we're talking automation, we're talking scalability, we're talking improvement, right? For many years, scalability meant scaling your systems, be it horizontal or vertical or whatnot. Now we are talking scaling resources, if you will, right? Scaling processes. So where you're sitting right now, in your experience, given what's going on, what are we talking about? Let's say you had a team of 10 engineers
So
building
I'll tell
X,
you a
Y, and
problem I
Z.
just solved with my engineers, right? Hiring engineers I found to be a little bit more problematic because engineers know coding tools from 3, 5, sometimes 10 years ago. Some tools haven't really changed. Visual Code, what have you. They aren't adapt with new tools, new programs. I just moved my entire team to Replit, right? Which is an online coding service. Costs a little bit of extra money, but it actually streamlined a whole lot of our processes and reduced the burden on our back end engineers who do all our server work and engineering work. Because I could literally have these guys deploy code, collaboratively share code, so we were solving a version control issue. And they were able to leverage AI agents in real time much better. So actually, we could build these workflow automations. So the thing is if developers aren't embracing the new tools, they're actually missing major opportunities because they're missing opportunities to be more efficient. And some developers like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I know what's best. I'm like, yeah, but you stopped learning 9.5 years ago. So no, you don't know what's best. Does that make
I
sense? I
couldn't
know it's a
agree
bit of
more.
a sensitive
No, no,
topic.
no, 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 no. It's not. It's not. I think I couldn't agree more because I tell people when someone says you have 10 years experience, my first question is, do you have 1 year repeated 10 times, or you have 10 years experience? Right. I think to me what you're saying is very similar because just because you've done something a certain way in the past doesn't mean you need to continue to do that in future. I think it's quite the opposite because I actually did a solo podcast not too long ago where I was asking this question out aloud, which is, if today, Ben, in our company we go write code the same way we did 6 months ago, it actually gets us anxious and worried because we know things are changing much faster than before. So even if you're solving the exact same problem today, you want to be solving it very differently because it actually can be solved very differently, except you want to be careful about over engineering, which is also an engineering problem sometimes, right? But what I
Yeah,
want to
well,
also ask you,
I always
sorry,
sit
go
there
ahead.
and say to people, I always say to people also, how can you ship this by Friday? I no longer accept 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months. I'm like, no, then we've overcomplicated the problem. Find the tools that will allow you to get this done by Friday and think through that process. And sometimes it really pisses my team off. But then you know what? They're funny. Oh, we worked out how we can do this, and then through this already Docker container that exists, we're able to plug this in, and now we've got this entire module. And you know what? Sometimes they deliver it in 2 hours, and they're like, "This was fantastic," because adding pressure on not just adding pressure onto the deadline, but going, how can we achieve this goal in? Or what I always say, always by Friday. Or I usually say to people, we've got 48 hours. How do we make it happen? And then it makes you reanalyze the problem. And sometimes I've started teaching all my development team and even my design team to literally start going into Chat GPT and go, here's what I'm trying to achieve. How could I get it done in 48 hours or less? And what tools would I have to use? And it will actually suggest to them solutions that they haven't even thought of. They didn't even think to do it that way. They didn't even know this library existed or whatever it is, right? And then here's a little hack for anyone who uses ChatGPT or you want to get better at ChatGPT. Have your conversation with ChatGPT like you're talking to an intern, and you'll be amazed at how better the results get. But at the end of your chat, go ask the ChatGPT, is there anything you would improve or optimize based on the conversation we've now had to help me achieve this goal better? And it'll go thinking, and you know what? It'll reanalyze your entire conversation and update your output, and you'll be surprised at the things it misses and it improves. And I sometimes ask it that question 2 or 3 times. And the solutions we then get, mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. Just when you thought you got a great result, ask it, how would you optimize or improve this to make it better? And it
Oh my
does.
God, it's amazing. So let me ask you. You had 10 developers, hypothetically, a year ago or 2 years ago. You're solving
I
a
used to
set
have
of
80.
problems.
I had 80 in an office in India at one point, but yeah.
So, okay, now maybe you've answered my question already. Given today's tools and how software is being built, what are we talking about, right? These are
I have
hard
4.
answers, but they're
I have
important.
4 developers now.
Does that, if I did the math, are we looking at 20 times more efficiency, Ben?
Oh, and the rest. 100 times more efficiency with the tools of today. If they're using the latest tools of today and the AI code tools, the suggestion tools, and I get them trained in those tools. So now they're efficient, because the problem is they were trained, they could have been trained in VS Code, but VS Code from 5 years ago. Not the same VS Code that's got Copilot. So are you trained in Copilot with GitHub and you're using the Copilot? Because, yeah, they know of Copilot, but you know what? They don't use it. So it's like, why are you not using Copilot? What? Why? Why? Right? And then now we train them in Replit, so like they can now deploy. And the thing is if you're not aware of Replit, is a fantastic tool. You can and
Yeah,
there's a
no,
few
I've
of
used
them.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, a few
amazing.
competitors, Bolt or whatever. Use whatever tool that tickles your fancy. But you can literally go in there, give it an English prompt, and it'll build you a prototype in less than 20 minutes. And the thing is that teaches you to start thinking through the problem differently. Because
Ben,
most developers
we have
never do that. They go, give me 90 days.
the last 20 minutes is, the reason I mentioned to you that the podcast is generally conversational is because it takes a little bit of time to learn each other and discover everyone's passion. I'm seeing it already. It's very obvious here. So I know we're 50 minutes in. Do you have a few more minutes to chat?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and anytime you want to wrap up, just let me know, and we'll wrap up here because this is very fascinating to me and it's very important. So I'm going to sort of, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I want to ask the same question, sort of rephrase it so it's clearer, and I'm going to restate it as well. So you were solving problems, and you're still solving problems in automation. We talked about some of the specific problems, and then we talked about sort of a recap to rephrase what I'm going to ask here. Is you said you had a team of 80 people, and to my question, which is going to be, I was going to take 10 people, and I was like, Ben, how many people do you think I need today? But you said 80 to 4. Now it is dramatic, right? I'm going to pause here for a second. Uh, is that as dramatic as the number sounds? Ben, I have a couple of follow-up questions to that. Is it really 80 developers to 4? Are we, sometimes you have to exaggerate to make a point here. Is there an exaggeration there, or is literally what I'm hearing there?
Literally what I have. So I manage the automation and AI strategy for an $80 billion tech company. That's a client of ours. And I was able to do that with one developer, being efficient and optimized. And
And let me ask.
I would get on calls with them, and they'd have 10 people debating this, talking about this. And they're like, where's your entire team? I've got one smart person on this call, and that's all I need to make this thing efficient. Because then I was able to be more agile and flexible than they were and use new tools. I wasn't locked into protocols. I think so there's also a problem with this. I have to be willing to invest in R&D. I have to be willing to invest in tools, but I have to be doing it in a way where I'm not just buying a tool for the sake of buying a tool or a new shiny object. It's, oh my God. It's like, let's buy this tool, let's master this tool, and see how far down the road it can get us to then step up and be better and evolve. It's a different approach, because there's a lot of people, they've got a subscription to 20 different tools. I'm like, which ones do you use? Oh, I use the one I've been using for the last 10 years. Why? Like, what that meant is you never put the time in to master the new tools. And this is where the problem lies, I believe. You have to, and as a company, you have to allow this education. So we, as a company, we've created this culture of literally learning these new things together. And I even teach my non-coding people coding stuff, because if they can understand the high level. So I taught all our team recently Crew AI and the agentic automation model and all this type of stuff, right? Company wide, because I wanted my customer support reps to understand how they could engineer or design automations. And now what we're doing is we're empowering them to design and deploy automations that'll help them, not having them try to always be pushing stuff to a development team. And that's why we built our no code platform to deploy AI agents.
Ben, what you're saying here is amazing. I'll need a whole hour with you more. But I have a couple of more questions to ask you. Tell me exactly how much time you have, and I'll pick the right set of questions to ask.
I've got about 5 more minutes. I've got a whole bunch of calls I've got to get back to it pretty
Okay,
urgently before
let's
Dibs there.
Okay, let's wrap this up then. We probably could continue this at a later time. I think I want to summarize this because this part of the call is very exciting to me, because I think like I mentioned it, one of my recent podcasts where I was asking and thinking aloud, which is, hey, how are we building software? Are we doing it differently? Because as a company, even before automation, we've always wanted to do things differently as things progressed. But now, things are changing even faster, and you don't want to get caught in time and do the same things the same way that you did in the past, because it doesn't make any sense. But there's a cultural, there's engineering element facets to it, but there's also cultural aspects to it, and how you do it in one country, in one region, or one part of the country is quite different from how you do it in another part of the world. So that's a conversation for another day, because I cannot possibly squeeze that in into the next 4 minutes, right? So let me keep this simple as we come to a closure. One is, thank you very much for taking the time, right? And hopefully we can have another conversation where we get into a bit more detail into a lot of the things we discussed here. The next 2 minutes, we'll wrap this up. I'm going to ask you a simple question, which I ask of almost all of my guests for the most part. What is your comfort food? What do you like to eat? Someone woke you up in the middle of the night. What is it that you like to eat?
I'm a big Thai food person. And as much as I love Indian food, the thing that I don't wake up craving is I like a good curry. So I love a good Thai curry, anything a peanut satay Thai style, Penang style curry, and big Thai fan. But that's because of my the Asian influence in Australia growing up, right?
Wow, okay.
I have been missing a simple kebab, doner kebab type Middle Eastern, some lamb, some that type of stuff recently. But yeah,
Okay, that's great to know. I love Thai food. That's awesome. Any closing
next time in
comments,
Washington, we'll make
Ben?
it happen.
Yeah, you said you're in Arkansas, right?
Yeah, I'm in Arkansas now, but I travel around the country because I literally run all of my businesses, and I travel around the US in an RV and go spend time and hang out with people and clients and
Oh,
develops cool
where are you
stuff.
mostly? Which part of the country are you traveling to generally?
So I've just made Arkansas literally my base, and then now we just traveling all around here. So I'm about to go to
Do you ever find
Seattle,
yourself
Washington.
on the East Coast?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm about to go to Vancouver, Washington, and Seattle. I got to do some business with some people up there, and then I'm going to be going. I want to go over, and I haven't done Maine or any of that area yet, so I want to kind of go back over that way, and yeah, all over the
Yeah, if
place.
you're in the area, certainly hit me up. We can talk more of this. And any closing comments, Ben, before we wrap this? What do you want to say to folks watching this, specifically about the last 20 minutes of what you said? How would you summarize that?
I'd be saying challenge yourself if you're trying to build something, create something, develop something. Challenge yourself to go, how could I automate this? Or what would I automate in this to make it more efficient or to make my people more efficient? And sometimes you don't know. But you know what? ChatGPT may be your best tool that you could use to help you think in different ways. And one of the tips is You can tell it to impersonate something. Most people don't realize this. Impersonate these people, right? And give me feedback on this idea, on different ways to do it. Because one of the best things you could do is gain insight into things you weren't even aware of, to go, hold on, there is a better way. And a better way could be faster, more efficient, more flexible. And when you're talking about anything that can help you increase your profit margins in a business, it could be extremely beneficial to you. It could give you a competitive edge to move faster. Because if all your competitors think it's going to take 6 months to launch something, and you can launch something in a weekend, that is possible. And a lot of people put that stuff down. They're like, oh, that's just that doesn't scale. You'll be amazed at how well some of these new solutions actually scale, because they don't have the burden of old thought.
You know, this is amazing. Again, thank you so much, Ben. Folks, this is Ben Bressington. Definitely check out automateboring.net. I have no doubts anything that you're going to be doing, Ben's going to be doing it faster, even outside the automation. Just the amount of information you shared in the last 20 minutes, Ben, that's it would take me like 2 hours to socialize that. So it's phenomenally useful stuff. I think developers are going to love this. Thanks so much, Ben. Until next time, you have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Wayne.